Have you ever felt your entire life crumble in a single moment, right in front of everyone you know? Hey, if you like stories about karma serving ice-cold revenge, make sure to hit that like button, share this story and subscribe. You're not going to want to miss how this one ends. So, there I was, standing in a room filled with smiling faces, colleagues, old friends, family, people I'd spent a lifetime with. It was my retirement party. 32 years at the same company, loyal, dependable, the guy who always showed up. People shook my hand, patted my back, lifted their glasses to toast what they called a well-earned rest. I should have felt proud. I should have been happy. But something felt off. You know that eerie calm before a storm? Like the air gets heavier and even the laughter sounds fake. That's exactly how it felt. I chalked it up to nerves. After all, retiring is a big deal. Saying goodbye to the routine I'd known for more than half my life. Then came the moment. My wife, Laura, the woman I had loved, supported and sacrificed for, clinked her glass with a spoon. That sharp, metallic ring cut through the noise like a knife. Everyone turned. She smiled, but not the smile I knew. No, this was different. Sharper. Colder. She cleared her throat and said, "Before we continue celebrating, I have an announcement to make." You could hear a pin drop. I watched her, heart pounding, waiting for something and anything good. But no. With a calmness that chilled my blood, she said, "I've decided it's time for a new chapter in my life. I'm leaving James for Alan. Alan, my best friend, a man I considered my brother." The room gasped. Glasses froze mid-air. Someone coughed nervously. Me? I stood there, stone-faced. Not a single emotion crossed my face. I wanted to scream, punch a wall, collapse, but I didn't. Instead, I smiled, looked around at all those stunned faces and said, "Thank you all for coming." And then I walked out, slowly with dignity, while the world I'd spent decades building burned behind me. As I stepped outside, the cool evening air hit my face like a slap. Sharp, real, unforgiving. It was strange. Inside, chaos. Whispers, gasps, stares drilling holes into my back. Outside? Silence. Just me, the stars, and the distant hum of traffic. I sat in my car, hands gripping the steering wheel, knuckles white. I stared straight ahead, not moving, not thinking, just being. You'd expect rage, right? A volcanic eruption of anger after being humiliated like that. But what I felt was colder, deeper. It wasn't rage, it was clarity. Because here's the thing, when someone shows you who they really are, believe them. And Laura, the woman I gave my youth, my dreams, my soul to, had just shown me exactly who she was. But if she thought I was going to fall apart, she had no idea who she was dealing with. You see, all those years of sacrifice, of quiet loyalty, they weren't weakness. They were armor. She mistook kindness for softness. Big mistake. I drove home, our home, and sat in the driveway. The house stood there, dark and still, like it was holding its breath, waiting for the storm it knew was coming. I didn't go inside. Not that night. Instead, I sat there and thought about the years I spent working overtime to pay for her degrees, her wellness retreats, her business ventures that always somehow ended up costing more than they earned. About the late nights she said she was working late, how I believed her without question. About Alan, the friend who'd stood beside me at my wedding, who'd been godfather to my children. The betrayal wasn't just a knife in the back. It was a blade twisted deep into my soul, serrating everything I thought was real. But here's where it gets good. Instead of crumbling, I made a decision. Right there in the silence of my car. I wasn't going to beg. I wasn't going to fight. I wasn't going to play the part of the humiliated husband. No, I was going to do something much better. I was going to make sure that by the time I was done, they would regret everything. Slowly, quietly, thoroughly. Because sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's silent, cold, precise, and oh, so satisfying. The next morning I woke up early, earlier than usual. Funny how betrayal sharpens the senses. Every sound, every ray of light felt louder, brighter, heavier. I sat at the kitchen table, the clock ticking like a drumbeat in my ears. The house was silent except for the occasional creak, as if the walls themselves knew what had happened. Laura wasn't home, probably at Alan's. Good. I needed space to think, to plan. Over a cup of black coffee, bitter, just like my mood, I made a list. Not a list of revenge tactics. No, not yet. This list was simpler, colder, just facts, dates, bank statements, business trips, withdrawals from our joint account that didn't add up. It was a puzzle I didn't even know I had been assembling for months, maybe years. And now the final picture was clear. I pulled out the old file box from the den, the one where I kept our financial documents, marriage certificates, wills, investment records, the skeleton of a life built on trust. And there it was. Right where I'd left it years ago, gathering dust but still sharp as a knife, our post-nuptial agreement. Signed after Laura's first indiscretion over a decade ago. She cried, she begged, she promised she'd changed. I believed her. Foolish, maybe. But love does that to you. The agreement was clear. Any infidelity would shift the balance of assets heavily in my favor. At the time, it was just a precaution, a gesture to rebuild trust. Now, it was my weapon. I smiled for the first time since the announcement, not a happy smile, but the kind that only comes when you realize you're holding a loaded gun while everyone else thinks you're unarmed. But I knew I needed more than just a piece of paper. I needed evidence. Solid, undeniable proof that Laura and Alan weren't just emotionally entangled, but financially too. Because if there's one thing cheaters hate more than being caught, it's losing the comfort they built on someone else's back. I made 2 phone calls that morning. First to a divorce lawyer. Not just any lawyer, but a shark, the kind that smelled blood from miles away. Second, to a forensic accountant. Someone who could follow the money trails Laura thought she had so cleverly hidden. I wasn't going to confront her, not yet. No, I was going to watch, wait, and let her dig her own grave. And when the time was right, when she least expected it, I would pull the rug so fast she wouldn't even have time to scream. Over the next few weeks, life at home became a silent battlefield. Laura moved as if nothing had happened. She floated through the house, humming, cooking elaborate meals she hadn't made in years, smiling that fake plastic smile that made my skin crawl. It was almost funny, how she acted like the announcement at my retirement party was some kind of bad dream we were supposed to forget. Like she hadn't detonated a bomb in the middle of my life. But I played along. I smiled. I nodded. I listened. Because the thing about war is, the best generals never show their battle plans. Meanwhile, the forensic accountant was working like a bloodhound, sniffing through years of bank statements, investment portfolios, credit card charges. The findings were worse than I thought. Secret trips masked as conferences, luxury items delivered to Alan's apartment, electronics, jewelry, things Laura never wore at home but were charged to our joint account. And then there were the property records. A small vacation cabin 2 states over, purchased under a shell company. Paid for with funds she siphoned slowly, carefully, thinking I wouldn't notice. But I noticed. And the best part? Every paper trail led right back to her and Alan. No plausible deniability, no way to explain it away. The lawyer was thrilled. "Open and shut," she said, practically rubbing her hands together. With the post-nuptial agreement and the evidence of financial misconduct, Laura had just handed me the keys to her own downfall. But I wasn't done. No. I wanted this to hurt. Not just legally. I wanted it to sting emotionally. I wanted her to feel the weight of her choices. I reached out to our children, adults now living their own lives with their own families. I didn't tell them everything. Not yet. Just enough to plant the seed of doubt. "Your mother and I are going through some changes," I said carefully. "I want you to know that no matter what happens, I love you both. Simple, calm, but heavy, with unspoken truth. Because soon, the truth would come crashing down, and I wanted them to hear it from me first, not from the twisted version Laura would inevitably spin. I wasn't just building a legal case, I was building a story, one where she was the villain, and I was the quiet, dignified victim who chose peace over drama. But underneath it all, I was sharpening the blade, and when the time came, I would strike, not with anger, but with precision, because some betrayals deserve nothing less than a masterpiece of revenge. Weeks turned into months, and to the outside world, we were the perfect couple. We hosted dinners, smiled for pictures at family gatherings, waved to the neighbors while mowing the lawn. But inside, every moment was a chess move, every word a calculated step toward checkmate. Laura, blinded by her own arrogance, believed she had won. She thought that because I wasn't fighting back, because I wasn't raging or pleading, I had accepted my fate. But silence is a powerful weapon, especially against someone who mistakes it for surrender. Meanwhile, my lawyer and the forensic accountant were assembling an ironclad case, a symphony of betrayal composed of bank records, travel itineraries, and financial statements. Every lie Laura and Alan told was now documented, dated, and ready to be unleashed. I wasn't just preparing for divorce, I was preparing for obliteration. But before that, there was one more piece of the puzzle to put in place. Our children. I invited them over for a casual dinner. Nothing fancy, just burgers on the grill, the kind of meal we used to have when they were teenagers, before life got complicated. They showed up laughing, bringing their kids, my grandkids, and for a few precious hours the house was filled with the kind of chaotic, messy joy that makes you forget the world is falling apart. As the evening wound down and the kids ran around the backyard, I pulled my son aside first. "Son," I said, keeping my voice low and steady, "there are things happening between your mother and me. I can't tell you everything right now, but I need you to trust me. When the time comes, you'll understand." He looked at me, confused, but nodded. "Okay, Dad, I trust you." Later, I had a similar conversation with my daughter. Same careful wording, same heavy pause, same look of confusion, followed by reluctant trust. It hurt, lying by omission to my own children, but it was necessary. I didn't want them blindsided by Laura's lies when everything came crashing down, because make no mistake, it was going to crash. Laura didn't know it yet, but the walls were closing in, and when they finally did, she wouldn't have anywhere to run. For now, though, I waited, patient, silent, because revenge, real revenge, isn't a slap in the face. It's a slow, tightening noose, and the best part is watching them realize they put it around their own neck. Not long after that dinner, Laura started acting different. She was cautious, jittery, like a thief who senses the walls creeping closer, but can't quite see them yet. She'd ask odd questions at dinner. "You're really okay with everything, right?" Or drop fake reassurances like breadcrumbs. "It's better this way, that's for both of us." I'd nod, smile, say nothing. Let her believe her lies were working. The truth? I was setting a trap, and she was walking right into it, blind and smug. One Saturday, she mentioned she'd be traveling for a work retreat. Old tricks, new packaging, but this time I encouraged her. "You should go," I said warmly. "You deserve a break." She smiled, relieved. She had no idea I already knew the real destination, a romantic weekend at the vacation cabin she and Alan bought with my money. Thanks to the forensic accountant, I had the cabin's location, the dates of their bookings, even the fake company name they used to launder the purchase. It was perfect. While Laura packed, humming to herself, I quietly made my own preparations. First, I made copies of every document, every record. I stored them in multiple places, a flash drive in a safe deposit box, cloud storage under a fake email, even a hard copy mailed to my lawyer. No room for accidental loss or misplaced files. Second, I finalized the paperwork for the divorce. Not just any divorce, a petition citing infidelity and financial misconduct, with attached evidence so detailed it could have been a crime novel. And last, I drafted letters to my children. Handwritten, personal. I explained everything. Not in anger, not in bitterness, but with clarity. I wanted them to understand the truth, to see beyond the smoke Laura would surely blow once the bomb dropped. Then, I waited. Laura left for her retreat Friday morning, suitcase in hand, blowing me a kiss like a bored actress on a closing night. Alan was waiting for her 2 blocks away, a fact she'd have found amusing if she knew I'd watched the whole thing from behind the curtains. Once the house was empty, I made my move. I called my lawyer. We set a court date. I sent the letters to my kids. I instructed the forensic accountant to initiate the financial freeze. By the time Laura checked into that cabin, giggling into Alan's shoulder, the wheels were already in motion. She just didn't know she was driving full speed toward a cliff, and when she fell, it wouldn't just be the loss of love or trust. It would be the loss of everything she thought she stole. The weekend passed slowly, almost cruelly slow. I pictured them there, laughing, drinking wine by the fire, maybe talking about the new life they thought they were building. Her life built on the ashes of mine. But here's the thing about fires. They consume everything, and even the ones who think they're tending it. Sunday night, Laura returned. She came through the door like nothing had happened. Radiant, carefree, the smell of expensive perfume trailing behind her like a guilty conscience. "How was the retreat?" I asked, my voice so calm it scared even me. She smiled, kissed my cheek lightly. Refreshing. Refreshing. If only she knew. What she didn't realize, what neither of them realized, was that while she was playing house with Alan, the courts had already stamped the date for our hearing. And even better, the financial freeze was active. Her accounts, her secret credit cards, the joint funds she'd been siphoning, all locked. The look on her face the next morning was priceless. I watched from the kitchen as she fumbled with her phone, frowning. She tried another card, and another. Declined, declined, declined. She slammed the phone down, biting her lip. "Everything okay?" I asked, stirring my coffee. She forced a smile. "Just some banking issues." "Ah," I nodded, sipping slowly. "Banks can be tricky." It was a small moment, a tiny crack, but it was the first of many. Later that day, I caught her pacing the living room, whispering angrily into her phone. I didn't need to hear the words. I knew she was talking to Alan. Because nothing tests a relationship like pressure. And Laura and Alan had built theirs on lies and stolen money. Pressure was about to reveal just how flimsy their foundation really was. That evening, while she sat scrolling through her phone with a forced casualness, I dropped the next bomb. "I think we need to talk," I said. Her eyes snapped up, wide and wary. "I've filed for divorce," I continued, sliding the documents across the table. She stared at them, mouth slightly open like she was reading a death sentence. I let the silence stretch, thick and suffocating. "Oh, and my lawyer will be reaching out to yours," I added smoothly. "Assuming Alan's not too busy to help you find one." It was a small jab, but it landed hard. She flinched, just a flicker, but it was enough. For the first time since the retirement party, I saw fear. Real, unfiltered fear. And it tasted sweeter than any victory toast. Because this wasn't anger. This wasn't screaming or fighting. This was her realizing she hadn't just betrayed a man. She had declared war on someone who wasn't afraid to lose, because I had already lost everything. Or so she thought. The days that followed were a slow-motion avalanche. At first, Laura tried to regain control, like someone frantically bailing water from a sinking ship with a teacup. She smiled more, cooked my favorite meals, laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. Classic manipulation tactics, softened the ground before dropping a bombshell of her own. But I didn't bite. I simply observed. Patience is a skill, one Laura never learned. Because beneath that strained smile, the panic was growing. I could see it in the way she clutched her phone, in the way her hands trembled when she thought I wasn't looking. Alan, on the other hand, was cracking even faster. I knew because a little bird, in the form of our forensic accountant, let me know that Alan had started moving money out of his personal accounts. Fast. Desperately. As if he realized Laura's ship was going down and he didn't want to be chained to the deck. It was almost poetic, watching loyalty unravel when the money ran dry. One night, after she thought I was asleep, I heard her whispering harshly into her phone in the bathroom. "No, you said you'd handle it." "What do you mean you can't help me?" Her voice was tight, choked with frustration. I smiled into the darkness. The great thing about betrayal is that it breeds more betrayal, like a virus. Once it starts, it doesn't stop until everything familiar is destroyed. And the beauty of it? I didn't have to lift a finger, they were doing it to themselves. I focused on what mattered. My future. While Laura scrambled, I finalized the plans for the woodworking business I had dreamed about for decades, but never pursued because, well, life, responsibilities, Laura's endless needs. I found a small storefront not far from home, charming and tucked away, the kind of place where time feels slower, where hands and heart build things that last. Signing that lease felt like reclaiming a part of myself I had forgotten existed. Freedom, real freedom, isn't loud. It's quiet, solid. Our door creaking open after being locked for too long. Laura didn't notice the papers on the counter the next morning, the lease agreement, the business license application, but if she had, she would have seen something she didn't recognize. A man no longer interested in fixing what she broke. A man building a new life, one she was no longer invited to be part of. It wasn't long before Laura's perfect little facade shattered completely. It started with the credit cards, declined at her favorite boutique. A small inconvenience, but humiliation has a way of growing from a seed into a wildfire when pride is all you have left. Then came the calls, one from her lawyer, or rather, the one she hastily scrambled to find. Turns out Alan wasn't as eager to fund her legal battles as she thought. Romance is a lot less poetic when it comes with invoices. Another from the bank, politely informing her that the accounts she thought were hers, the vacation cabin, the hidden savings, were frozen pending legal review. And then the real kicker, the realization that the post-nuptial agreement, that dusty old document she probably hadn't thought about in years, was now the sword hanging over her head. You could see it in her eyes. Panic, regret, fear, delicious. She tried to talk to me, really talk. Not the fake, sugary words she'd used before, but pleading, desperate words. "James," she said one night, cornering me in the kitchen, "can't we just work something out? You don't have to do this." I looked at her, really looked. There was a time when I would have melted at that look, would have bent over backward to make her feel safe, loved, forgiven. But that man was gone, replaced by someone forged in betrayal, cooled in patience, sharpened by quiet rage. "I'm just doing what's fair," I said calmly, stepping around her like she was nothing more than an obstacle. Fair, a word she had long forgotten the meaning of. Alan's cracks were turning into fractures too. From what I gathered, and believe me, I kept tabs, he wasn't returning her calls as much, was busy with work, had things to figure out. Translation? He saw the sinking ship for what it was, and decided it wasn't worth drowning over. Poetic justice, really. The woman who blew up my life in front of everyone was now standing in the ruins of hers, alone, abandoned, with nothing but the echo of her own terrible choices. And the best part? I hadn't screamed, I hadn't begged, I hadn't fought. I just waited. Because sometimes the most satisfying revenge isn't a thunderous explosion, it's a quiet collapse. Slow, inevitable, and impossible to ignore. By the time our court date arrived, Laura was a shadow of the woman who once clinked her glass at my retirement party, announcing her betrayal like it was some twisted celebration. She showed up in the courtroom looking small. Gone was the confident, smiling Laura, who thought she had everything figured out. In her place stood someone clutching at straws, dressed in a suit that couldn't cover the cracks spreading beneath her skin. Alan wasn't with her. Of course he wasn't. When money dries up, so does loyalty. As I sat there, calm and collected, I thought about the irony of it all. For years I had been invisible to her, just a fixture in the background, the man who paid the bills and stayed out of the way. Now she had no choice but to see me. The judge called our case and we stood side by side, the final silent war before the gavel fell. Laura's lawyer tried to spin the story, painting her as misunderstood, as someone caught in the crossfire of a loveless marriage. It was almost impressive, the mental gymnastics. But then my lawyer stood up and presented our case. The post-nuptial agreement, the financial records, the evidence of secret trips, hidden purchases, betrayal after betrayal, neatly documented and time-stamped. Each piece of evidence was a nail in the coffin she had built for herself. Laura sat there expressionless, but her hands gave her away, clutching the table so tightly her knuckles turned white, as if she could somehow hold on to the life slipping away from her. And then came the judge's ruling. The house, mine. The majority of the retirement savings, mine. The investments she thought she'd hidden, exposed and divided according to the brutal math of her own infidelity. And as for alimony, denied. Because misconduct, especially when proven beyond a shadow of a doubt, tends to dry up sympathy, Laura was left with a small settlement, barely enough to scrape by, and no claim to my future earnings, my business, or my pension. She tried to speak, maybe to plead, maybe to argue, but the judge shut her down with a stern wave. The gavel hit the bench, the sound sharp and final. It was over. Laura stumbled out of the courtroom without looking back. No words, no apologies, nothing. She walked away empty-handed, the same way she had left me, only now it was her life in ruins. And me? I walked out lighter, freer. Because sometimes justice doesn't roar like thunder. Sometimes it whispers, and it's deafening. Walking out of that courtroom wasn't just stepping into fresh air. It was stepping into a new life, one that was mine and mine alone. No more second-guessing every decision. No more walking on eggshells to keep the peace. For the first time in decades, I wasn't living in someone else's shadow. I was free. I celebrated in the simplest way possible by picking up the keys to my new shop. It was a small, dusty place with creaky floorboards and a big bay window that let the afternoon sun flood in. Most people would have seen an old, tired building. I saw possibility. It smelled like sawdust and old dreams, a scent that wrapped around me like an old friend welcoming me back. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into it, ripping out old shelves, sanding down battered counters, sketching plans for custom pieces of furniture I'd always wanted to build, but never had the time or permission to create. The work was hard, my muscles ached, but the pain was a kind of therapy. Each nail hammered, each plank cut was another piece of the life I was rebuilding from scratch. Meanwhile, the fallout from the divorce rippled out. Laura moved into a small apartment on the other side of town, a far cry from the spacious home she once paraded guests through like a queen in her castle. Word got around. Small towns are funny like that. People who had once clinked glasses at our anniversary parties suddenly weren't so eager to return her calls. Alan, he disappeared like smoke. Last I heard, he had taken a job out of state. No goodbye, no closure. Just gone. Turns out, betrayal is a lonely game. I didn't gloat. I didn't brag. I didn't need to. My life and my real life and was the victory. My kids visited more often, bringing my grandkids who filled the shop with laughter as they helped me sand wood and sort nails. Their presence reminded me why I had sacrificed so much for so long, and why it was worth it to finally fight for myself. At night, after the world went quiet, I'd sit by the large window of my shop, cup of coffee in hand, watching the stars. Peace, not the kind you beg for, but the kind you earn, blanketed me like a warm quilt. Laura had tried to erase me from my own life. Instead, she gave me back something far more valuable than she ever took. Myself. There's something different about freedom when you've had to fight tooth and nail to earn it. It's not loud or flashy. It's quiet, deep, and unshakable. And that's exactly what I felt every morning when I unlocked the door to my shop, turned on the lights, and smelled the comforting mix of fresh wood and machine oil. Some days, I caught myself just standing there, hands on my hips, soaking it in. Not just the shop, but the fact that I was still standing, stronger, wiser, whole. Business started slow. A custom coffee table here, a bookshelf there. But word spread. Quality work, fair prices, and, maybe most importantly, a story. People love a good comeback story. Neighbors who once whispered behind cupped hands now came in smiling, asking for custom pieces. Young couples furnishing their first homes. Retirees wanting heirlooms for their grandkids. They didn't say it, but I knew. They'd heard what happened, and they respected the quiet dignity of someone who had every reason to lash out, and didn't. Laura, on the other hand, wasn't doing so well. She picked up a job at a local boutique, not exactly the glamorous jet-setting life she had envisioned with Alan. I ran into her once at the grocery store. She looked tired, worn out in a way that makeup and forced smiles couldn't cover. Our eyes met across the produce section, a fleeting, heavy moment. She gave me a half smile, one she probably didn't even realize was more apology than greeting. I nodded, polite but distant. Because what do you say to someone who burned your life down and handed you the match with a smile? Nothing. The silence was enough. As I walked away, I realized something powerful. I didn't hate her. Not anymore. Hatred would have meant she still had a piece of me. But she didn't. Not a single shard. She was just someone I used to know. Later that night, back at the shop, I worked on a rocking chair, a commission from my daughter for her new baby. As the wood curled away from the plane, soft and warm, I thought about how life had come full circle. Laura's betrayal had seemed like an ending, but it wasn't. It was the beginning. Because sometimes you have to lose everything you thought you wanted to find what you really needed. And sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't ruining someone else's life. It's rebuilding your own, stronger, brighter, better than ever before. The funny thing about hitting rock bottom is you realize how much weight you used to carry without even noticing. Expectations, disappointments, silent resentments stacked like bricks on your shoulders. But once it's all stripped away, once the noise, the lies, the fake smiles are gone, what's left is pure, raw, real. That's what peace felt like to me. And it wasn't just about the shop or the money or the house. It was about waking up in the morning without a pit in my stomach. It was about laughing, and really laughing, without that nagging voice in the back of my head, wondering if it was all about to collapse. One afternoon, as I was closing up the shop, my son showed up. He leaned against the doorframe, watching me with that half-smile he got from his mother, but somehow wore differently, softer, more honest. "Got a minute?" he asked. I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag, expecting him to talk about work or the kids. Instead, he said, "I just wanted to say, I'm proud of you." It hit harder than I expected, not because I needed validation, but because after everything, the lies, the betrayal, the humiliation, my kids still saw me for who I really was. Maybe even clearer than before. "Thanks, son," I said, voice rougher than I liked. He stayed a while, helping me organize some of the tools, chatting about little things, normal things. The kind of conversation that doesn't seem like much until you realize how rare true normalcy is. When he left, I sat back on the worn stool by the workbench, staring at the golden light spilling through the windows. And I thought about how differently things could have gone. I could have exploded that night at the party, made a scene, fed the fire with anger and bitterness. I could have fought dirty, tried to hurt Laura the way she hurt me. But instead, I chose silence. I chose patience. And in doing so, I didn't just win, I transcended. Because real victory isn't about who falls hardest. It's about who rises, one, and how quietly they do it. Laura had taken her shot, but it was me, the man she thought she could break, who ended up freer, stronger, and more alive than ever. And the best part? I didn't have to destroy her. She did it to herself. As weeks turned into months, the new rhythm of my life became second nature. Wake up early, open the shop, create with my hands, watch something beautiful take shape from raw, forgotten wood. Each piece I made wasn't just furniture, it was a testament, proof that from ruins something better could be built. The days were filled with small joys, lunches with my daughter and her growing family, evenings helping my grandson hammer nails into scrap wood, pretending he was helping Grandpa. Even the simple act of brewing my own coffee in the quiet of the morning felt like a victory. And you know what? I didn't miss Laura. Not one bit. It's strange how someone can occupy so much of your life, your mind, your heart, until suddenly they don't. Like a song you used to hum out of habit, but once it stops playing, you realize you never really liked it that much. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the shop in molten gold, I stood by the window, cup in hand, and thought about dreams. How we're taught to bury them young, sacrifice them at the altar of responsibility. And how, if we're not careful, they rot inside us unfulfilled. I had done that for years, put my dreams on a shelf so Laura could chase hers, so the kids could have stability, so the bills could be paid on time. And yet here I was, proof that it's never too late to choose yourself. Laura had tried to rewrite my story that night at the party. But here's the thing about stories. The last chapter is what people remember, and I wasn't going to let mine end in betrayal and bitterness. No, mine would end in peace, creation, legacy. People say revenge is sweet, maybe for some, but for me, revenge wasn't seeing Laura's downfall. It was standing there in my shop, heart steady, spirit light, surrounded by the life I built with my own two hands. That was sweeter, and it was only just beginning. It was a rainy Saturday afternoon when the final piece of my new life slid into place. The kind of rain that taps gently on the windows, steady and soothing like the earth itself breathing. I was in the shop, sanding the last armrest of a rocking chair, a gift for my soon-to-arrive granddaughter, when I heard the door creak open. I looked up. Laura. She stood there, damp from the rain, holding a flimsy umbrella that hadn't done much to keep her dry. For a moment, we just stared at each other. No words, no need. She looked older, not just in the way people age, but in the way life wears down those who've been fighting losing battles for too long. Her eyes darted around the shop, taking it all in. The sturdy workbenches, the polished pieces ready for delivery, the sense of calm that filled the air. "This is nice," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I nodded, wiping my hands on a cloth. "It is." She shifted on her feet like she was working up the nerve to say something else, something important. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," she said, eyes glistening. There it was, the apology I thought I wanted for years, the words I had imagined hearing, rehearsed 1,000 times in my mind, and yet standing there hearing them I felt nothing. No rage, no satisfaction, no desire to rub salt into old wounds, just peace. "I hope you find what you're looking for," I said, keeping my voice kind but firm. She nodded slowly, the realization sinking in, that forgiveness doesn't always come with a door back into someone's life. Sometimes it's a closed door with a final, gentle click. She left without another word, the bell above the door jingling softly behind her. I stood there for a moment, watching the rain blur the world outside. Then I turned back to my work, because that's what life is. Not the storms that hit us, not the people who betray us, but what we choose to build after the wreckage, piece by piece, with our own hands, our own hearts. The last piece of the rocking chair slid perfectly into place. I leaned back, running my hands over the smooth wood, and smiled. Not the smile of someone who had won a war, the smile of someone who had walked away from the battlefield and found something far better waiting on the other side. Weeks passed. Seasons changed, summer folding into the crisp gold of autumn, and life moved with it quietly, steadily. The shop thrived not just as a business, but as a place where people came to watch something real being built with patience and care. Old friends, new faces. Even strangers would wander in, breathing in the scent of sawdust and fresh beginnings. They'd watch me work and sometimes stay, telling stories about their lives while I crafted something for theirs. One day my daughter came by with her newborn daughter in her arms. Tiny, perfect, with a head full of dark hair and fists clenched tight against the cold air. She handed her to me, smiling. "Meet your granddaughter." I held that small, fragile life in my hands, feeling her warmth, her heartbeat against mine. And I realized this was it. This was the point of surviving the wreckage. Not revenge, not getting even, but getting better, getting whole. Living a life so full, so honest, so untouched by the bitterness others tried to drown me in, that their betrayals became nothing more than a distant memory. Holding my granddaughter, I felt something shift inside me, a quiet kind of pride, the kind that doesn't shout or demand attention, the kind that simply is. I rocked her gently in the chair I built, the one I had carved late at night under the glow of a single bulb, pouring all my hopes and dreams into the grain of the wood. Outside, the wind whispered through the trees. Inside, the world was still. I thought about Laura, about Alan, about everything they had tried to take from me, and I smiled, a real smile, deep and unburdened, because they hadn't taken anything worth keeping. In the end, all they had done was set me free, and sometimes freedom looks nothing like you expected. Sometimes it looks like a small shop, a new life built with scarred hands, and the soft sigh of a sleeping child cradled against your chest. As I sat there rocking my granddaughter, the chair creaking softly beneath us, a thought settled into my mind. Simple, clear, undeniable. Sometimes the greatest revenge isn't proving someone wrong, it's proving yourself right. Right for believing you could rebuild. Right for trusting that quiet strength inside you. Right for walking away when staying would have meant losing yourself entirely. Laura and Alan had written me off, dismissed me as a relic of their old life, something to be discarded when no longer convenient. But here I was, more alive, more me, than I had ever been under their shadows. I wasn't the man they tried to leave behind at that retirement party. I was the man who stood back up without needing to shout about it. I was the man who found purpose not in revenge, but in rebirth. The kind of victory that doesn't come with applause or recognition, the kind of victory that feels like peace settling deep into your bones. My granddaughter stirred slightly, her tiny hand curling around my finger, and I realized this was legacy. Not the money, not the house, not even the shop, but this moment, this quiet strength passed down to a new generation, a reminder that life will knock you down, that betrayal will cut deep, but that you can always choose to get back up. And when you do, you don't just survive, You thrive. As the last light of day faded and the stars blinked awake above, I sat there, a man who had lost everything he thought mattered and gained everything that truly did. A man who learned that sometimes the best way to win is to let them go and build a life so beautiful, so strong, so unbreakable that they can't touch you anymore.